interests. Consecutive interests, right? Consecutive meaning one comes after the other. Okay. The topic today is different. The topic today concerns what's called concurrent interests. Concurrent interests. Okay. Concurrent interests, as the name suggests, is when one or more people, or actually two or more people, have a present interest at the same time. So look at example number 2. Right? It says Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker. That's new. As joint tenants. What this tells you is that you have multiple present interests. And we've not done this before. The rules are very different when you have multiple present interests. Turn this off. So annoyed. I got this very wireless Bluetooth mic. It's awesome. I can walk around the room, but I can't get to work with YouTube today, so I'm going to have to go back to the old school, so it's going to suck. But sorry for class. Next time, if I'm staying over there, you'll hear me. Sorry, people on Zoom Live. Next time, it's really cool. Brand new. Just get Razor came out last week, and I bought it immediately. But I've wanted this thing for years. I used to actually, if you watch old videos, I would carry my phone around with a lapel mic plugged into it. I'd be carrying around the room. It looks really weird. I stopped because it got annoying. But this thing's really cool. The one that shot Zoom, my audio was great. Audio at home was awesome. That's one that shot Zoom. Okay. All right. So let's talk about concurrent interests. There are 3 kinds of concurrent interests we're studying today. There's the joint tenancy. There's the tenancy in common. And there's the tenancy by the entirety. The joint tenancy, the tenancy in common, and the tenancy by the entirety. Please, please, please do not confuse these terms. You are going to want to say joint tenancy in common. Some of my other class said this morning, right? There is no such thing as a joint tenancy in common. It's not a thing. I've said that before, and I hate myself for it. It's not a thing. I'm warning you. Not a thing. There's no such thing as a joint tenancy by the entirety. That is not a thing. Okay, but keep these phrases distinct. Right? Let's start with the joint tenancy, which is example number 2. It says Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker as joint tenants. Okay. Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker as joint tenants. Okay, who's up next? Oh, Alexa, you remember you've been like dreading like the past week getting cold on? Actually, it's even longer because before the midterm, right? So it's like 2 weeks. I'm sorry, Alexa. I caused you just emotional distress, intentionally inflicted, no doubt. No, it was at most negligently inflicted. It wasn't deliberate. So any whatever hell it is, easy, whatever. Negligent infliction, and I can't do that many letters. Okay, so Alexa, let me ask this question, please. We have this arrangement, right? Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker as joint tenants. What happens when Alex dies? You don't seem sure. Oh, that's a good thing to have in class. Claire? What happened?
Baker will own it.
Why does Baker own it?
If they're just
What's that thing which tells you what happens after Alex dies? What's it called, Claire? You're not wrong, but that's the term I'm looking for.
The right of surveyorship.
Survivorship. Right, survivorship. Okay. So this is something different, right? Usually when you think that someone's dying, it's a life estate, right? But this is a little bit different. We have a joint tenancy here. And the defining feature of the joint tenancy, right? The basic feature of the joint tenancy is what Armin said is the right of survivorship. When one joint tenant dies, the other joint tenant gains the property in fee simple. Now, you're going to want to spin this in your head and say, oh, yeah, Josh, it's like a life estate and a remainder. No, 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 no. Very different. Why? A life estate is a present interest, and a remainder is a future interest. This joint tenancy is simply a present interest. Okay. Sophia, let me ask this question again in a different question. In example number 2, does Ollie have any interest? Does he have any reversion? Why not? Oh, no, that's the answer. But why does he not have future interest?
because either Alex or Baker.
So what happens when Alex dies, then Baker dies? What happens to Baker? Who's heirs?
I think it goes to both of theirs.
That's not right.
So
What happens if Alex dies first and then Baker dies? What happens to Blackacre?
whoever survives, they get it.
I'm telling you, Baker survived and Baker died. What happens to Blackacre then?
If Baker survives and
Alex, A dies first, then B dies. What happens to Blackacre?
we're gonna be
Correct. Not both heirs, it's B's heirs. See that clear? And Alex dies first, his heirs get nothing.
But if they die at the same time.
That never happens. Never happens. Someone dies first. No, I'm serious. I mentioned this in class. Even in plane crashes, someone dies first. Who's sitting in the front row? I mean, I'm serious. I'm not being facetious. Insurance companies have to decide who actually dies first for purposes of probate law. So, out of your head, they die different times. No. Okay. Let me get this point across. With a joint tenancy, we have a right of survivorship. Okay. Ollie has no future interest. Okay. We say that the present interest is that Alex and Baker are joint tenants. Or you can also say, someone asked me in class, I'll say it here, Alex and Baker have a joint tenancy. You'll see it both ways. They mean the exact same thing. I'm sorry, yeah, I forgot this classroom doesn't actually have a line of sight to the board. Imagine that. It would be such a useful thing to have that everyone can see the board. By the way, again, these stairs are death traps. I complain all the time, but I'm going to fall on my butt one day and you're going to laugh at me, but it's very dangerous. Not paying attention. Okay? And Tony, I didn't forget. I'll get to you in a minute. Okay? Alex and Baker are joint tenants. What's the future interest? The future interest is a bit confusing, right? Because I think Alyssa said a minute ago, and Sophia said the same thing. We don't know who gets it. It could be A, or it could be B. It depends who dies first. So what we can say is that Alex and Baker have a right of survivorship. Now, someone says, Josh, that's not the way we do it. We say he has a future interest in this and this and this and this and this, right? Yeah, I'm just waiting for someone to say it. The lingo here is a bit different, right? Because we don't know who's going to get it. This is not like a contingent survivorship, don't even go there. All right. Just say they were on survivorship. That's a phrase. And what that tells you is that either one of them will get it in fee simple, right? Whoever lives longer, right? If A lives longer, then he gets in fee simple. If B lives longer, he gets in fee simple. Right? So the example I gave you, A dies first, A's heirs will get nothing. B gets in fee simple. The joint tenancy vanishes. It's just a normal fee simple. And B can do with what he wishes. Sell it or leave it to his heirs. Okay. What's significant, when you have a joint tenancy, when A writes his will, A cannot give his heirs any interest in Blackacre. Right? When you have a joint tenancy, you cannot give anything to your heirs because it's not yours to give. If you die first, you lost the most dangerous game, right? You lost the game of life. And you have nothing. Baker has in fee simple. A's heirs get nothing. Okay. Tony.
Super stupid questions. Like you said, someone always dies first. I mean, just on the one-off event that they're sitting.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Well, how?
For purposes of insurance law, they'll find someone who dies first. Right? There has to be someone who dies first. I know lawsuits love, I mean, look, a nuclear blast wipes out an entire city. How close are you to the epicenter? What room are you in when it went off? I mean, look, I'm being somewhat facetious, but these are actual questions. When you have plane crashes, for insurance purposes, they actually have to calculate these things, right? Or if you have a car crash, imagine a family's in a car crash. You could determine time of death with some accuracy, right? What was your cause? Was it internal bleeding? Was it trauma to the head? There are various causes of death you can track, right? Did they die in the ambulance? Unless everyone's incinerated simultaneously, which is who cares, right? Blackacre's gone. It's been wiped out. It's a nuclear wasteland, right? Called Greenacre. I don't know. It's glowing. I shouldn't joke. This is bad. It's really, especially now, I shouldn't be joking. But there's an air raid sign. We're screwed. We have no bomb shelters. There's no basements. So we're all toast. I've been thinking that we have no basements. There's nowhere for us to go. We got nothing. Yeah. Okay. Ketsia and then Jason. Gosh. You want to say, don't you see it? Say it like this.
Okay.
Yeah, I know exactly what they asked me because I had the other class. So they're actually getting like agitating because I give them such like specific rules in the prior class. Yeah, there's not really. I mean, someone asked me earlier if you want to write, they have a future interest. Will make you feel better. I'm sorry, I put the wrong spot. Alex and Baker have a future interest. Does that make you feel better? It is true though. No. Well, I mean, look, this is why I don't like doing it this way, right? It's N because they share it. They share that future interest, don't know which one's going to happen. It's not either or. It's something you share. In the present moment, they share that future interest. That's why I don't do it, by the way. You're welcome. Thank you, Katsia. The reason why I don't do it is because smart students like, let's just think, well, that's not, yeah. The language doesn't work with concurrent interests the same way it did last topic because we don't know what the two will get. Right? In the first half of the semester, you knew if this happened, then this. If this happens, there's no doubt. But here, we don't know who's going to live longer. It's a natural termination, isn't it? Right? You don't know death. There's not like I suppose you can murder someone, right? But generally, you don't control a person's life. Jason, your hand was up. I'm sorry, I skipped over you.
Is there a limit on how many joint tenants are removed?
No, unfortunately, there's not. Those questions get really annoying, right? So I'm not going to do this question today. On page 380 or 390, 390. There's a question that involves 3 tenants, and it's a beast of a question. Try it. We'll do it in class next week. I'm not going to do it today though. But look, if you look at the old exam, I put 3 or 4 tenants at the same time. It gets really hard. So I had somewhere here.
So just as a general rule, like for joint tenancy, the owner never retains any, that's just how it is. The owner doesn't retain any interest.
No, I didn't say that. In this question, it's not.
Okay.
Someone asked me this question earlier today. You can get very creative. You can make a joint tenancy that expires at a certain point. You can create a joint tenancy that's subject to executory interest. Painful, but true. You can.
But in terms of the basic. Like,
Well, if you're asking this example, no, but don't make a general rule. You can. The future interest can go back to the grantor if he gets tricky. You're seeing now Clark's question is actually well taken. My midterm had very simple future interest questions. I can start mixing stuff up because I can merge future interests with concurrent interests and throw in a leasehold, make it more complicated. Right? And let me make this point. I forgot to make it earlier, but Clark just reminded me. Many of you probably have apartments and you have roommates, right? And you might call them your co-tenant, right? Those are not tenancies in common. What you have all roommates, right? These are fee interests, right? This is like a fee simple or a fee simple determinable. These are fee interests that required a common law livery season. You'll have leaseholds. Leaseholds are an entirely different species of property because leaseholds terminate at a certain point. These do not terminate. So don't confuse if you have a roommate, you're a co-tenant, that's not a tenancy in common. Okay? All right, everybody with me. All right. All right, so again, when you're characterizing the present or future interests, right? When you're characterizing the present or future interests, the language will be a little bit different. You don't know who has what, but it's N. I just want to be sure, but everyone sees why it's N. They share that survivorship together. Okay. All right, good. All right, let's move on. Let's do example number 3. Okay, we're handing in a minute. Okay, so example number 3. Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker as tenants in common. So you see the difference between 2 and 3. Number 3 says joint tenants. So number 2 says joint tenants. And number 3 says tenants in common. All right, Patty, let me ask this question. What happens when Alex didn't get anything?
Baker doesn't have an incentive.
What it's in plain English, right? What happens in this question when Alex dies?
Alex,
Baker's still alive.
Alex is part of the interest goes to Alex's heirs.
So let's just say Alex has one heir named Chris. What happens when Alex dies?
Alex is part of the interest goes to Chris.
And then what's relationship with Chris and Baker?
They then become tenants.
Correct. Very good. So let's look this up as 2 steps, right? The present interest here is Alex and Baker are tenants in common. Or you might see it, Alex and Baker have a tenancy in common. You'll see it both ways. I don't care which one you're right, doesn't matter to me. But the future interest is a bit trickier, right? Jimmy, who has the future interest here? Who's theirs? Is it and or? They both get it?
There's no right of survivorship.
Yeah, good answer. So this is where the and and the or actually are very annoying. I could give you a good answer for the first question. This one's actually harder, right? So we know with a tenancy in common, there's no right of survivorship. With a tenancy in common, there's no right of survivorship. The future interest belongs to the heirs of the tenants. Belong to the heirs of the tenants. Who are the heirs here? the heirs of Alex and the heirs of Baker. Now, why is it end? They're not going to die at the same time. No matter how hard you try, they're not going to die at the same time. One will die first, the other will die second. Let's just say Alex dies first. When Alex dies, Alex's heirs step into Alex's shoes. Right? Let's just say, what is it? Let's say that Alex's heir is Chris, and Baker's heir is David. All right, just make stuff up. When Alex dies, right? Alex dies. At that point, Chris and Baker are tenants in common. Right? When Alex dies, Chris steps into the shoes of Alex. And now Chris and Baker are now tenants in common. Right? Now, I'm telling you that Baker dies. At that point, Chris and David are tenants in common. Huh. So look at that. Neither of the original two guys are still there. Now you have Chris and David. The tenancy in common survives, even though the original tenants do not. And this goes on forever. It's basically impossible to destroy a tenancy in common. You can. We'll get to that later. But the tenancy in common survives. Just different people keep slotting into them. So you see, a joint tenancy is real simple, right? The joint tenancy is real simple. With right of survivorship, after one death, it goes to the other one in fee simple. But with the tenancy in common, it's not so simple. With a tenancy in common, it goes on and on and on for each successive heir. And then what happens when Chris dies? Those are Chris's heirs. And when David dies, those are David's heirs. Now, where does this question become impossible? I made it simple for you. I said there's only one heir, right? Chris is one heir. I'm sorry. A is one heir named Chris. What happens if A died without a will? He died in intestate. Might have 30 or 40 heirs. Every son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, great grandson, granddaughter, niece, nephew, mother, father, sister, brother. They're all heirs under the intestacy statute. So you might have, instead of one person slotting in, 4 or 5 people slotting in, depending how big the family is. Think that's easy to manage? Right? Imagine you're Baker. Your friend Alex dies. You like him. You have to deal with his entire family as your co-tenant. You might have 10 new co-tenants coming in. And they have access to the entire property. But co-tenancy is not a pleasant arrangement. They might sound good for the first generation, but they break down very quickly. Right? The idea of a joint tenancy is if it's meant for one generation. As soon as one person dies, then it ends. Be simple, right? Tenancy in common creates significant administrative work. That you're always dealing with new tenants coming along. Yes, Gabriel.
So, sorry, let's say that. They just hold on to the, I'm assuming with Alex and Baker, they each have 50-50.
Don't get those do fractions. I'm going to urge you not to do fractions in this class. Trust me, this one. Don't do fractions. You're going to hate yourself. It gets very, as is law students hate math. And fractions really don't work yet. So I don't hear any numbers until I bring them up. Joel, then Caitlin.
What if they have the same here? Like then it's just one person.
Oh, that's a good question. I've not considered that. So let's say that Chris was the heir of both A and B. Right? Is that kind of your question?
Yeah, like eventually.
I think at that point it'll become a fee simple. that might be one way of terminating the tenancy in common. It's a good question. I never thought about that. Everyone see Joel's question. If both A and B had the same heir, that is, Chris was both of their heirs, I'm like 95% sure it would become a fee simple. There might be something I'm missing. I hate to say yes when I haven't thought of it before, but I think that's right. I'll give us more thought later, but I think you're right. Caitlin. Well, if you're not married, it gets very messy. If you're not married and have kids, it gets a lot more. If you're married and you have kids, it's actually pretty straightforward. But if you're not married and you don't have any kids, it gets a lot more complicated to divvy it up. So it depending on the family structure is. Or let's say you write a will and you say you have 40 years in your will. You can do that, right? You say, in my will, I want 40 people to have an interest in Blackacre. Good luck with that, right? You can do that. Insane, but you can do that. Every person who lives my block now has interest in Blackacre. Sure, why not? You can do it. All right, everyone get that? All right, try very hard, right? Try very hard not to confuse the joint tenancy and the tenancy in common. You're going to want to say joint tenancy in common. It's going to roll off your tongue. It's not a thing. This is like possibility of reversion, not a thing. Okay. One other point, I want to flag this because you might see it later. Not this class, see it next class. You might see something like this. I'll put over here. Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker for their joint lives. Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker for their joint lives. This is different from what you've done before, right? So Isabella, in this question, what happens when A dies? When A dies, what happens to Blackacre? I think joint lives means not that they live the same amount of time. What do you think joint lives means here? Well, obviously one of them dies first, right? So let's say A dies first. What do you think happens to Blackacre when A dies? All right. And what happens when Baker dies? Yeah, Alex is dead, then Baker dies. Where do you think it goes? Say it. You want to say it, just say it. Well, you're one or two. What's your first option? Get it off. Ollie. What did Ollie have? The first. Okay. You'll see questions like this, right? Very good, Phil. It's a little bit unfair. I've done this before, right? So what we say is that Alex and Baker have a present interest in joint life estate. In joint life estate. Okay. I want you to see the difference in the language. It's so similar. Joint tenants, joint life estate. See how similar those are? I can trip you up very, very easily. And then Isabella's second option was the correct one. Not Isabella. Ollie has a future interest in reversion and fee simple. Right? The way this one works is when Alex dies, Baker gets it. And then when Baker dies, it goes back reversion to Ollie. But this is different than example number 2. Right? Because in example number 2, let's see at the same time, Ollie gets nothing in response in reversion. There's no reversion to Ollie. So you have to distinguish between the joint tenancy and the joint life estate. None of the above. It's not a concurrent interest. These are life estates, right? This is a very special kind of life estate where they both have a life estate at the same time. It's sort of very unique. It's not a concurrent interest. It's a good question. Not a concurrent interest. It's not tenancy in common. It's not a joint survivorship. It's not the above. It's just very unique. You'll see this in different places. So someone asked before, I forget who asked, does Ollie get anything back? The answer is no. If Ollie wants to get it back, he does this. That's what Ollie does. That gives him reversion. Example 2, Ollie has no future interest. In this one, Ollie does have a future interest. So let me I'll use a little bit of a personal one. I actually create such a conveyance myself. So, so my daughter crayon the wall significantly, and I was like, wow, that's beautiful. I didn't want to erase it because it was so nice, so I just put a frame around it. I legit, so we actually drilled the frame into the wall. Because originally we had the frame hanging, it just started hanging on the frame. So okay, that didn't work. So we actually drilled the frame into the wall, right? So it's actually, but then I noticed it's roughly the shape of a portrait, right? It's in the right shape, so I got a frame the right size. I put a plaque next to it to make clear the ownership structure of the painting. And as her guardian, I'm allowed to do this. So from M to her parents for their joint lives, then to C, her sister, and her heir. So when mom and dad are dead, sister gets it. So I created a joint life estate for myself, followed by a remainder to her sister. You're welcome. So people can ask, I have no idea what the hell it is. It looks black, but you all know. And to the walls, you know the lyric in the song. She drew on the wall. Oh man, it's Dr. Dre and Lil Jon, same class. Yeah, and I am going old school. All right. You know where my mind is. Do you have a question? What kind of question about something? Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry, that's mean. Because that's not the conveyance. Because she has to share with her sister. That's why. I was actually trying to teach her how to share with the future interest. It was actually my mind. Like I was like, one day I'll explain to her, you gave your sister a future interest. Very nice of you. Now I was as her guardian, I did it for her, but I'm allowed to do that. And it's actually a little plaque. It's next to the wall. Anyway, you're welcome. So this is not a tenancy in common, it's a joint life estate. And I was actually dreading that like the maids would clean this, like, no, don't clean it because it's like it's important. So we put a frame around it also. All right, go on. All right. Everyone with me so far? All right. Now let's talk about how you actually create a joint tenancy. How to recover from that. I think I peaked for the day. How do you create a joint tenancy? Okay. There are requirements to create a joint tenancy. They're called unities. It's sort of a weird phrase, unities. Why are they called 4 unities? All 4 of these requirements must unite. They must be present at the same time, right? In order to create a joint tenancy, these 4 requirements must be present, and they must remain present at all times. If for whatever reason, one of the unities is broken, or say severed, the joint tenancy severs. And the joint tenancy actually becomes a tenancy in common. Remember like Chutes and Ladders, right? It kind of goes down. If it's no longer a joint tenancy, it becomes a tenancy in common. You can go down, you can't go up. You can go down. Everyone with me? So the 4 unities can be remembered with an acronym or mnemonic device. TTIP. TT IP. Okay. The first is time. The second is title. The third is interest. And the fourth is possession. I'll walk you through these. Okay. So if we look at example number 2, it says Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker as joint tenants. I think Pierre, you're next. Pierre, does this conveyance tell us anything about when the interests were conveyed to A and B? Right at the board, right here, example number 2. Does this conveyance tell us anything about when these interests were conveyed? I don't know if a date. Were they conveyed at different points in time?
Well, at that example, they were at the same time.
Aha, correct. Were they conveyed simultaneously here?
It appears to be that way.
It is, not just appears, it is that way. Okay. With time, unity is the interests must be conveyed at the same time. The interest must be conveyed at the same time. TTIP. They were conveyed simultaneously. Why is this important? If I convey, one interest to Alyssa today, another interest to Sophia tomorrow, they're not at the same time. It must be done at the same time for you to have a joint tenancy. Okay. And I think Maddie is next. Did you guys switch seats? Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I don't really care. Just give the name tags there, right? So Maddie, with example number 2, was the conveyance done in the same instrument? Was the same instrument used to convey the interest to Alex and Baker? Oh, what a good answer. All in the same sentence. Perfect. Right. If there are 2 things in the same sentence, it's in the same document, it's in the same interest, the same document, the same instrument, or the same title. Right. The second requirement is the interest must be conveyed in the same instrument or document or title. They all mean the same thing, right? They're all 3 are saying the same thing. Piece of paper, right? The same legal instrument, same legal title, convey the interest. And Marty gave me 100% correct answer. How do you know this? We're the same damn sentence, right? Periods and commas are your friends. They tell you a lot of information. In this case, we see a period, that means there's a single instrument. If something comes after the period, it's a separate instrument. Everyone understands that? Very good point, right? The periods are really super duper helpful for you to figure out this topic. And it makes sense. If they're given at the same time, they have to be given the same document, right? That's sort of like obvious. And there's a really practical reason why this requirement exists. Back in the olden days, before computers, before phones and everything else, you needed a single transaction to sort of do everything, right? I'm handing you a piece of paper that you both see. There's no forgery. It's at the same time, convey this interest. At the same time, the same piece of paper. All right? Everybody with me? The third one is one that gives people the most difficulty. Okay? The I stands for interest, which means they have the same interest in the property. Now, who asked about fractions? Gabriel did. You need to sort of think about fractions here, although I don't want you to do it too much because it will confuse you. It's not worth it. But they must have equal shares, right? They must have equal shares for a joint tenancy. Okay. Yes, Jason.
And one person accept the joint tenancy conveyance on behalf of another, like as like a representative on them.
Someone asked this question earlier slightly differently, and I'll make sure I answer it the same way. The laws of the state vary on what's needed to actually close on property. If anyone ever actually bought a house with the closing process, there's a lot of things you have to sign, right? And there are ways to basically appoint someone as your agent, like to accept on your behalf. I think it would be problematic to appoint your joint tenant as your agent. I think there's a conflict of interest. I don't think that could be a proper fiduciary. I am not 100% positive on that. My inclination is it's too much risk for fraud by having your joint tenant your agent. That's my like 5-second reaction, but I have to think about some more. Good question, so you guys are really thinking this topic through. I don't have answers for everything, and in fact, I really don't know everything. I know late '90s pop and rap music, but I can't tell you the answer to the question. I don't know. Yes.
It's a profit share.
I don't want to get into profit. I really don't. So this is why Gabriel, and I'm not trying to resist your question, but once you're getting into the math, it gets really complex, and I don't want to go there. I really don't, because this is hard enough to get by itself. If I bring the numbers to your, I've done this before, right? I've taught this where I put numbers on the board and I lose everybody. I need to get through this. Maybe we'll do numbers later. Yep. Next class we'll do numbers, but I need to get through this today. Okay. So the 3 unities so far: time and title. Those are the easy ones. Interest, a little bit trickier. The fourth one's actually very important, and it's possession. Right. Each tenant must have access to the entire parcel, the entire lot. Right? Each tenant must have access to the entire parcel, the entire lot. And I mean the entire lot, every inch of it. If you put up a wall or a fence, or perhaps even lock the door, and you lock out your co-tenant, guess what? You've just dissolved your joint tenancy. Smooth move, right? If you exclude, remember the right to exclude, right? If you exclude your joint tenant from parts of the property, you may actually sever your joint tenancy, destroy your right of survivorship, meaning you'll never get a fee simple out of it, right? The cost of keeping a joint tenancy is actually quite high. Okay, so Trey, I think Daniel, and Ketsia, and maybe 1 or 2 others. Yeah. That's fine, as long as it's both agreeing it. We'll do a case next class, next week, involving locking of a front door awareness. And one of the tenants said that was you out to. Yeah, we'll do that next week. Daniel?
Might be criminal, but like, if I were to put a safe in the property, would that technically be restricting some sort of access?
Yeah, these are not pleasant to have, right? Again, people always ask, why would you even create this? They're very risky. I'm sorry?
I was just thinking,
They're very risky, right? It's kind of like giving your wife a life estate, unless she never get kids. You remember the case where you gave her the life estate unless she has kids, and then, it means you don't trust these people, right? If you give someone a joint tenancy, it's not an act of love. It's almost an act of torture, right? Because they're basically always bound by someone, they want to be there or not. If you love someone, say with a fee simple. But so then Valentine's Day, I'll say it again. But yeah, the tenancy in commons are even worse, right? Because look, if you screw this up, you're stuck with a tenancy in common, and then forever your heirs are. Yes, Kelsey, go ahead. It is a lot of work. Well, it's a lot of work to get to a fee simple in the end. Right? In other words, O can just give a fee simple straight up, but he doesn't, because whatever he doesn't trust him, doesn't like them, wants to see who lives longer. I don't know. I don't. This topic is hard for students. They can't conceptualize why on earth would you do this. They're not common today. I don't think these are very common today. Neither are future interests for that matter, right? But unfortunately, you have to know it. Law school. Yes, Tony.
Didn't the book say that one of these states have mostly completely gone away with, or there's, I can't remember the exact.
I think so. I'm blanking on that one now, but they're not. These are rare. I mean, a lot of stuff I teach you has almost no relevance, which sounds very reassuring. Look, I'm honest. I gotta tell you the truth. But you gotta learn a lot of stuff either. One LOL, right? It's you have to learn this stuff. I'm sorry. Daniel's your hand up again, and then Natalie.
Yeah, I was gonna say, joint tenancies are bad and tenancy
Worse.
are bad. What's be the best way to give someone
Say it with a few simple.
or two people?
Let them figure out themselves. Let them figure out themselves. They can title whatever they want. Right? I mean, if you actually trust someone, you can let them negotiate their own terms. Don't set the terms for them. Yes, Natalie? Right. The third refers to the interest, right? This is why I hate the fractions, but it doesn't matter, right? It's basically a 50-50 share of the profit. I don't want to say that because that's not how it works, right? They both have equal undivided share. Because if we say, what's an equal undivided share? I don't even know what that means, right? It's a hard concept. But the fourth one is physical possession. The third one is legal interest, a theoretical number. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm fighting hard with the numbers. You want to push me there, I don't want to do it. Because whenever I do it, it just gets much worse. I go down a rabbit hole real quick. Was there another hand? I think I saw a hand. Was that? Hear everything. It's a curse. Man, who got woken by the thunder this morning? Did that wake you up this morning? That was loud. That was like a train running through my backyard. I was scared. Yeah, I saw a hand here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, you're doing this thing to me.
Okay, go ahead. I think I know what you're asking. I'm not really sure.
It's not like ownership of the land.
Well,
You just don't
subdivision,
know what part of the land you own.
we'll do subdivisions later this semester. Maybe come back later. Do subdivisions later. Don't want to do it right now. What else? Okay. All right. All four of these unities, TTIP, right, must be present when the document is created, and they must remain present. If at any point A sells his interest, he severs the interest unity. If B erects a fence, he severs the possession unity. You can't really violate the first two unities. Like even if you rip the document up, it doesn't really do anything. So really, it's the third and the fourth one that you have to look out for, right? If you sell your interest, you're severing the third unity. If you put up a fence or a wall or something, you break the fourth unity. And again, it goes down the chute. It goes down from the joint tenancy to the tenancy in common. So look at example number 4. Example number 4. Blackacre from Ollie to Alex and Baker's joint tenants. So who am I up to? Andrew, so what's the present interest here before the period? Up to the period at least. Before the period. Correct. And then what's the future interest again before the period?
Well, they both A and B have the right.
Correct. A and B have a right of survivorship. Correct. All right. Now we see at the period, Andres, that it says from Alex to Chris. What is the consequence of that transaction? Are they joint tenants? Oh.
I guess not joint tenants.
What happens when A conveys his interest to C?
Oh, the tenants in common.
They are. Why?
I would be able to be simple.
What about the unities? Deborah, I see it.
Okay.
Deborah, answer. You're next anyway. You're gonna say it. Just say it out loud. I can see the mask moving. Correct. Which one was destroyed? Correct. When Alex conveys to Chris, it severs the interest unity. Sever means cut or destroys, right? When Alex conveys to Chris, it severs the interest unity. As a result, the joint tenancy becomes a tenancy in common. So Andres, back to you. What then is the relationship between Alex and Baker? What's the present interest?
So they're now tenants in common.
Correct. Chris and Baker are tenants in common. Right? Chris and Baker are tenants in common.
That's not Trey. Okay, they're tenants in common. So then, Deborah, finish it up. What are the future interests here? Who has a future interest? Well, they have the present interest. Who has a future interest? With a tenancy in common, who has a future interest? Who's heirs? Is it and or?
And.
Good. Chris's heirs and Baker's heirs. Very good. Okay. Everyone see that? It transforms. Once you sever the interest unity, it transforms from a joint tenancy to a tenancy in common. What used to be a right of survivorship between A and B is gone. Now Chris and Baker's heirs will get it. So really, one second, I know Trey and then Aaron. Baker got the shaft here, didn't he? Right? Baker was just waiting, like, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. Once A is old, he dies, I get fee simple. You get nothing now, my friend. You get nothing. And by the way, you can't usually, I mean, it's hard to sell it, your interest in a, I mean, first off, why would Alex even make these transactions? Why would Chris want this? Right? Why would Chris want to be a co-tenant with someone else? It's very unrealistic to actually buy into a tenancy in common. They're not desirable properties. But it was done here. Maybe Alex just wanted, I was like, screw it. I don't want to be with Baker anymore. Why would Chris buy it? I don't know. Okay. Trey and then Armin. Correct. Yeah, it's almost always the third. I mean, really, it's the first and the second because once you sell it, the first instrument's no longer valid. It's really a separate instrument and a separate time as well. So it's really when you sever one, you sever all, right? You can't just sever one, but usually you say the interest one is the one that's severed. That would be different, right? That's to build a wall or a fence or something. They're not getting it. Yes. Yeah, the severance one is usually a physical thing, but the first three are legal.
So we generally break it up by sentence, right? So we get exactly how we would write.
Period, yeah.
We'd go through the right of survivorship and then you say severs.
Yeah, well, you say at some later point in time, it could be 5 minutes later, it's matter, but it's a different point in time, there's a severance community. It's different.
Excluding of the co-tenant and the part of the property, it would also sever the joint.
Correct. In this question, it destroys the joint tenancy.
What would, like in this case, it created a,
Tenancy in common,
yes, what would happen in that? Property.
same. If A excluded B, it become a tenancy in common, just the same. A and B. Right, let me take Deborah's question. It's a good question, right? Let's say that A and B are joint tenants. A builds a wall down the middle of the property. A and B are now tenants in common. The act of building the wall severed the possession unity, and it destroyed the right of survivorship. Yes, up here.
So if it's not a wall, okay, it's just a door, you can see that.
Well, so I mean, I don't want to dodge your question, but next class we'll do examples of locking door. So let's do the case next week. We'll see a little bit more. Yeah, Joel.
Can there be any restrictions on severing?
What do you mean restrictions?
Well, I'm just like asking because, I don't know, it just seems like they keep it.
Oh, they can. It's very easy. These are very easy to get out of. Yeah, the answer is usually no. I saw another hand. Yes, Kevin, good. Oh, did I? Wait, I'm sorry. What'd you say? Uh-huh. No, and you want to stay in fee simple. I mean, but it's not because you're always stuck with the other guy. It's not in fee simple. So that's it. That's the answer. It's. I mean, I can see you're just like fighting because it's not what I taught you for an entire month, and it's different here because it's not a fee simple. Yes. Blocking in Caitlin.
Oh.
I saw her name. I thought you're not. Yeah. So okay, go ahead. Both. I wouldn't spell that differently. Yeah.
Just to confirm, you said that selling of the possession, interests?
Correct. Well, you're literally transferring the interest from one person to another. That's severing in the most easiest sense, right? But you really want me to talk about the numbers, don't you? What if Baker sold a 25% interest to Chris? Now his entire interest only sold half of his interest. That would do it also, right? In this question, making it easy on you. He sold his entire interest. So if he sold only half, like, hey, Chris, I'm selling you half of my interest. So now they would all be tenants in common together. 3 of them. Brady Bunch, right? They're all together, right? One roof. I recently watched a movie. It was terrible. I forgot how bad it was. I regretted it. It was funny when I was a kid. Yeah, go on.
For exam purposes, is it more correct to say that this severs the interest unity rather than the title or?
I would say interest unity, but the other ones are not wrong. That's my opinion. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I know it's not for the future interest, it's not in fee simple. Could you say they have a future interest in tenancy in common? Don't say that.
Look, we'll do the example page 390, which I've been teasing you about, shows why it's really hard to write out that way. I'm resisting your answer. So I'll say next week, next class. You're not wrong, but it gets very complex when you have multiple tenants. I always feel like I'm telling you not yet, not yet, not yet. They want to give you the rules like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that, right? So I have to like ease you into it before it is anyway. All right. Everyone with me so far? Okay, doke. All right, so that's example number 4. Okay, well, now let's turn to number 5. All right, so far we studied about creating a joint tenancy. These 4 units. It's fairly complex. It's a lot easier to create a tenancy in common. There are no unities. You can do it at different times. You can create a tenancy in common with different instruments. I give you an instrument, I give you an instrument, that's fine. You can do that. I can give you different interests. I can give you a 75% share and you a 25% share. I can do that. But the 4th unity is mandatory. With a tenancy in common, each co-tenant must have access to the whole possession, the entire lot, right? Same deal. You can't build a fence, you can't build a wall down the middle, right? You can't block out your room, your co-tenant. With a tenancy in common, the 4th unity still must be present. One tenant cannot exclude the other tenant from Blackacre. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, everyone with me. That's easy. That's the easiest one, I think. All right, so let's look at number 5. Is it Marco? Molly, oh, so close. I'm getting closer. I promise. I'm actually getting much better at the name, so I'm trying. Molly, what are the okay? So let's look at example number 5 before the period. What are the present interests before the period? Yes.
The interest.
Good. Exactly. Right? Alex and Baker are tenants in common. That's exactly right. Okay. What's the future interest? Correct. Yeah. Alex's heirs and Baker's heirs will have the future interest. Correct. All right. So Molly, we get to this period, right? What happens to this period? What's the consequence of the next sentence? Is anything severed? Ooh. Okay. Alex's interest is severed, but does that really matter here? No, it doesn't. Does it transform to something else?
Still to
Correct. Ah, so what's the present interest now?
Baker.
That is correct. Chris and Baker are tenants in common. Molly, finish it up. Where are the future interests?
Chris is in.
Perfect answer. Very, very good. That's a lot easier, isn't that? Right? You just slot in one to the next. Again, it will not always be this simple. I'm giving you guys just one heir, but I can promise you on the exam they'll multiple heirs. Or they'll die intestate, right? And that just makes it a lot messier. Because in reality, people don't usually have one heir. It's very rare. People have multiple heirs. You know how it goes.
Okay, everyone okay with number 5? Let's do the last one, number 6. So far we've been talking about the joint tenancy and the tenancy in common. But there's also a special type of concurrent interest for married couples. It's called a tenancy by the entirety. The tenancy by the entirety. Okay. The reason why this is special is it locks in the couple wants to get divorced, right? With a joint tenancy, one joint tenant can be a jerk and sell his interest and destroy the joint tenancy. But with marriage, right? With marriage, that does not work. With a tenancy by the entirety, one spouse cannot sever the interest of another spouse. And please don't ask me polyamory, 3 spouses. Please don't ask. If someone's going to ask that, just don't ask it, please. Right? This doesn't exist yet, right? There's limitations. Okay, so to create it, you have the same 4 unities: time, title, interest, possession, plus a 5th, which is M, marriage. Time, title, interest, possession, and marriage. Okay, and this means you're married at the time of the conveyance. If you have the conveyance today and you get married a week later, that doesn't work. You must be married at the time of the conveyance. Right? You can't like upgrade a joint tenancy to a tenancy by the entirety by getting married. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It has to be at the same time. Okay. Now, if you're a married couple, you're not required to have a tenancy by the entirety. Married couples could have a joint tenancy. Think of the Harmon case, the Riddle case we have for reading today. They were married, so they had a joint tenancy. Indeed, a married couple can have a tenancy in common. There's nothing preventing you. There's nothing requiring a married couple to do anything. They can tile whatever they want. Right? With a tenancy by the entirety, there's a right of survivorship. When one husband dies, the wife gets it. When the wife dies, the husband gets it. Right? Very simple. But the biggest difference is with the tenancy by the entirety, one spouse cannot unilaterally convey it that the other spouse is conveying. This is what's called a homestead. You may have heard this in bankruptcy. The marital home is considered special. And even in a bankruptcy proceeding, it's very hard to seize the marital home. Yes.
Right, so this could be one of those situations, like if they had any of the other things, like the married couple, and they did have like a child, let's say, an heir, and then they both died, then it would go to them and they would have that fee simple.
Well, look. So if say the husband dies first, right? Wife has his fee simple. Once wife has his fee simple, she can choose to do whatever she wants.
Okay.
So give it to heirs, sell it, whatever she wants. But the important point is you cannot dissolve a tenancy by the entirety unless you get a divorce. That's it. That's the way to break it. Or you kill your spouse, right? That's the other way, right? But short of murder, being slightly facetious, short of murder. I mean, look, in the second case, the wife tried to break it, and she actually succeeded, right? But short of murder, right? Divorce is the way to break up a tenancy by the entirety. Yes, Carol.
When did both spouses end up dying?
Stop asking that question. No, it doesn't happen. Stop.
There's not enough time for them.
Stop. I'm not asking that question again. Stop it. There's something more important things to do. No. It doesn't happen. Obsessed with this unilateral death. Great.
Like,
Let's read the next case and how that's done. But they'd have to do something to create a tenancy. You can't create it yourself, right? You have to convey it and come back with you. We'll do the next case. But again, with a tenancy by the entirety, one spouse cannot break unilaterally. You are stuck till death do you part or divorce, whichever comes first. Usually divorce comes first. You can't get divorced after you die. That doesn't work. I don't know. The worst dead person. I'm not even sure of that. Whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
If you die and you come back to life.
God, it's not with the zombies. No. You guys stop. You're ruining my class with these questions. Okay. I have so much to cover. Okay. We're like 10 minutes from the other class. Yes, I know. If it's about dead people, I'm not answering it. Yeah, right. Again, if you have a joint tenancy, you get married later, you don't upgrade your property. Right? It doesn't go ladder. You only go down. If you get divorced, though, it becomes a tenancy in common. That's the trick. It's not a joint tenancy. If you get divorced, you're all the way down to the bottom, truths and ladders, right? Tenancy in common. So you lose that survivorship right altogether when you get divorced. Okay, with me? Yes. Last question. I want to move on to the case.
If a person gets divorced and then they remarry and they create a new tenant.
They'd have to do from scratch. Start from scratch. You can't like reanimate the tenancy by severed. Any questions? Not about dead people or simultaneous murders. Law students love these sort of like crazy hypotheticals and like. Anything else? No. Okay. I gotta move on. I'm sorry. Oh, what was?
No, never mind. I'm just kidding.
Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead. Do it. Go. Okay. I'll move on. All right. Riddle. Marty. You want to give me the facts? You want to give me the facts in tell Cindy. Riddle v. Harmon, please.
Wife in California.
Okay.
They were joint tenants.
Let me pause you briefly. California does not have tenancy by the entirety. So maybe some of you might have been wondering that, right? California is what's called a community property state, as is Texas. In a community property state, tenancy by the entirety works a little bit funky. We'll get to it later. So that's why they're joint tenants. Right, go on.
So all the 4 units.
Yeah, 4 units, correct.
The time, title, interest, and position of that.
Good.
And then when I believe the wife, when she found out that she couldn't get rid of her part of the Blackacre by will, contacted the attorney and tried to.
Do you think Miss Francis liked your husband very much? No, this was not a happy marriage. Do you think? Do you think the kids got along with the father very well? No. This was not a happy family, right? Okay, so thanks to that, Marty. So you have a husband and wife that were married for many years. They own Blackacre in joint tenancy. And then the wife finds out, wait a minute, when I die, I can't leave my share to my kids because of this joint tenancy. And there's this right of survivorship, which my husband will get the property in fee simple. I don't want that to happen. Right? All right, so Trey, if the wife didn't want the husband to get survivorship, what could the wife have done that was perfectly, legit, perfectly legal? Well, that would be enough because it is a joint tenancy. It's not tenancy by the entirety. Divorce would not have been enough. She should have divorced, probably. They would be very happy. But what could the wife have done? It's in the case.
I know that she couldn't unilaterally.
What could she have done normal? The normal thing to do in this case if she wants to sever the unity. What could she?
Just make a will, I guess?
No, that will not be enough because survivorship. What is the traditional way of breaking unity? It's not hard.
I just don't know how to.
Cameron?
The straw man.
The straw man. What's the straw man?
She would sell her interest to a third party that didn't really care, and then he would sell it back to her.
Correct. Trey, what's the consequence of the straw transaction?
It's no longer a joint tenancy, but now it's a tenancy in common.
Why?
Because she gave up that third
Correct.
unity interest.
Correct. Okay. The way to sever the third unity, the interest unity, was what's called a straw transaction. The wife would basically sell her interest to someone, a random person. Usually it's the secretary of the lawyer, right? You sell it to the lawyer's secretary, and then immediately you sell it right back to the wife. Or someone made this point in the earlier class that was very bright. Why couldn't you just sell it to her kids? Wouldn't that just like make things a lot simpler? Sell the interest of the kids right up. Now I have an answer why she didn't do that. I think, right? Anyone want to guess what? Why did? Yeah, Trey, I have an answer. I'm guessing. They could, right? Once you sell your interest, they can kick off mom. Armin?
And maybe the kids had no money.
Maybe the kids had no money. I think also she wanted to keep this whole secret. That's my reading, right? The more people you tell, the more likely it gets leaked out to the husband. So I'm guessing this relationship was broken, and she didn't want the husband to know. I mean, look, it is selfish. I don't use the word lightly to basically engage in these sorts of games and not tell your family about it, because that way they don't find until you're dead. But for a lot of people, they're like, it's not my problem. I'm dead. What do I care? And it just leaves your family to such difficulty in litigation. This went all the way up to the Court of Appeals of the state. That's a lot of work, right? I mean, a lot of times celebrities die without wills. Aretha Franklin had no will. Prince had no will, and they basically say it was too much work to figure out. I'll let someone else deal with it because I'm dead. And that's like a bizarre. I guess it's rational, but it really puts your family in a tough spot. Clark.
I'm a little confused. I thought that she didn't want to divorce her husband. The idea, I guess, I said that she didn't want to divorce her husband because that would resolve.
No, it wouldn't. It's not a tenancy by the entirety. It's a joint tenancy. Okay. Right. So my theory, which are based on just speculation, she didn't want anyone to know. So they did the straw transaction. Jason, what did they do?
Her attorney granted a deed to herself and gave her a 1/2 interest.
Can you do that?
According to common law, no.
Wait a minute. So I mean, you're right. So Jason, say it one more time. The attorney told the wife to do what?
Grant a deed to herself.
Can you hand yourself a stick? Can you hand yourself a clump of dirt? Like, remember livery season, we put the little twiggle? That sounds really bad. Never mind. Oh, God, I'm getting canceled. Today's my last day of job. You'll have a new professor on Thursday. Right? Can you give yourself a clump of dirt? No. So the common law rule was that you cannot sever unity unilaterally. Right? The common law rule was you cannot sever a unity by yourself. You have to do the sort of dummy, the straw purchase, where you sell it to a person and the person sells it back to you. And that's effective, right? But the lawyer advised her to do this thing. Now, Daniel, what was the risk of taking a sort of, unusual approach? What was the risk here? Why was this risky?
Well, I don't know about risky. I know it wasn't allowed.
What was it? But when it happened, well, Daniel, let me ask you. So you're a reasonably prudent lawyer, right? And I ask you, would you advise your client to do this? Why not?
Seems like every transfer needs both a grantor and a grantee.
Correct. But the lawyer here let her roll the dice. Was that risky?
Sure.
What did the lawyer put himself at risk of? Malpractice. So I always make this point of the semester. When you guys are lawyers, you have a duty of professional competency. If there's a precedent from the state's high court saying you cannot do this, and you tell your client, yeah, go ahead and do it anyway, guess what? You might be at risk of malpractice. Imagine the lawsuit went the other way. The court says we're going to stand by the common law. Husband gets survivorship rights. Kids get nothing. Guess who's getting sued? You, the lawyer, for giving bad advice, for advising the mom on a completely illegal thing, right? Yes, Kyle.
Did the lawyer take this risk to try to change the law?
Oh, you're such a good question. That's my next question. Oh, you're one over. I'll come back to you. Kyle, why do you think the lawyer did this? I'll come back to you, Josh. Maybe, right? I don't think that's what happened, but maybe that's what the lawyer says in his defense. Maybe the lawyer said this rule's old, the law is trending in a modern direction, and we're willing to take the risk. So it maybe isn't malpractice, right? I think it probably would be, but we're in California.
Don't laugh. I'm gonna give you a rule of thumb. Any case in your book that's from California is going to reverse the common law. Or New Jersey. Jersey or California. Trust me on this one. I'm not lying to you. I know the books in the case. All the cases in the book. If you have a Jersey or everything's legal in New Jersey, right? There it is. Did you say that? I just said that. Right. It's a line from Hamilton. Everything's legal in New Jersey. It's when Hamilton and Berg dueled in New Jersey. They could cross to Weehawken. Right. Any case from New Jersey or California is reversing the common law. It's without fail. So maybe to Kyle's point, the lawyer's like, well, we're in California. The court's just like making stuff up. Let's roll the dice. And maybe in California that's reasonable. I wouldn't do it here in Texas. That would not be a prudent action. we still cite cases from when Texas was a republic. Those are still valid cases, right? I'm serious. The Supreme Court of Texas considered binding law the Supreme Court of the Republic of Texas case law. So we're old school. But I would do this in California, a different rule. Okay. All right, but very good question, Kyle. You anticipate my next question. The best question is anticipate my next question, right? Because you know where it's going. So good job. All right. Everything's legal in Jersey. It's true. If only. All right. So the lawyer advisors do this thing, and the court agrees. Right, John? What's the court hold here? That this self transaction is permissible?
Was because they said that they might as well be able to do it if they're able to do it anyway because of the elaborate legal fiction.
Okay, very good. Right. What's a legal fiction, John? Use the exact phrase I had in mind.
I guess it would be something that is actually not real, but it's possible in a sense.
Legal fiction.
You say you're accomplishing the same purpose as you were doing before.
Yeah. Okay. I think you're in the right ballpark, right? A legal fiction is a concept where the law says you can't do this, right? But we'll let you do this, which is almost identical to this, right? You can't do A, but you can do almost something identical to A, right? You can't convey it to yourself, but you convey it to a fake person who conveys it back to you, right? It doesn't exist, right? It's not a real transaction. And the court's like, why are we sticking with this stupid straw purchase that's a waste of time and money, right? Every transaction is expensive. Lawyers are involved. You have to pay fees to the court, fees to the county, etc. Why can't we let Miss Frances cut to the chase, sever it by herself, and let her intent? Her intent is to sever the unity. Why should we force her? Also, she's dead. She can't undo it, right? It's not like someone can go back and say this wasn't valid. So let's honor her intent, and let's give the property to the children as the heirs of the tenancy in common. So the court holds here the severance of the unity transform the joint tenancy to a tenancy in common. As a result, there was no right of survivorship, and the heirs of Frances stepped into her shoes. So now the husband was tenants in common with the heirs of Frances. That's got to be awkward, right? Just think about that for a second. The heirs were suing the husband. And what's their remedy, the reward? They're not tenants in common with the husband. That's got to be awkward, right? You were just suing this guy for all these years, and now you're tenants with him. And what probably happened, they sold it, and they divided for them. Which is what this is all about, right? The tenants in common don't actually want to live with the husband. I'm guessing they were bad relations. They require marriage. I have no idea. Right? They want to sell. They want their cut. They don't want to actually be roommates. So again, I think someone said it was a Ketzi earlier. Why would anyone do this, right? Well, somebody might be married one day, and maybe you'll be in the dean's office, and they'll say, "Do you want to join tenancy?" And you might think very carefully. But if you don't do a joint tenancy, do tenancy common, is that any better? Maybe just don't get married. Just screw it, right? You know, this is taking properties. Like, forget it. Never get married at all. What's the point? But as between them, joint tenancy is probably better than tenancy common. But what do I know? And more.
So how does selling that property work?
The court would order a sale and divide it up based on the percentage of ownership. The husband will get half, and the heirs will split the other half.
Does he have to agree to sell?
No, and that's what's important. When the court orders a sale, you can't say no to the court. Right? The court forces a sale over the objection of one of the tenants. Because look, if they all agree to sell, they don't need a court order. But if the husband resists, says, "I don't want to sell it," you need a court order. And actually, they put up for auction at the county or anything else.
So could they say the husband doesn't want to sell and doesn't want to move, do they like normally can try out? The
As a settlement, yeah, they say if you buy our share out, you can keep the fee simple, but there's no guarantee that happens. But again, the husband's like, my wife wrote this invalid conveyance, which the court upheld because it's California. Now I have to pay to get rid of these kids. It was mine. Right? So imagine it's very fair. Right. Also, and imagine you're the lawyer for the husband, and you find out your wife wrote this conveyance. What do you tell your client? This isn't valid. Ignore it. Right? It's a completely invalid instrument. You just ignore it, and then you get fee simple on your own. But then, of course, it's California. California does what they do, and they reverse common law. Trust me, property too, it's a lot more. Every California case you see with reverse common law, trust me, it's really outlined. Who's right? California, New Jersey, without fail. Needless to say, these minority rules. So right now, if it's California, New Jersey, it's a minority rule. So to note, this is not the majority rule. You still have to do these sort of straw transactions in most states. Evan.
Yeah, just along the same kind of idea, strong and factoring. Isn't that what companies use like mergers, like they'll shell company, or they'll have the shell company purchase there?
Correct. Yeah, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but the concept of straw exists in many places where you just need a SPAC, you hear the expression, special purpose acquisition company, SPAC, basically make an entity, the sole purpose of buying something, and then they just, yeah, straws are very common in law. Yes. No, it does not. I don't think it does. Unless something changed recently, but I think the answer is no. All right. Other questions? All right. Let me wrap up a bit. For next class, be very careful and look at page 390. There's a question there, top of the page, and try to look at that carefully. I'm going to summarize a bit. I'll do the exit poll. I've done the exit poll in a while. I forgot to do it this morning. If you have any questions, I can't put it here. But let me just briefly summarize. I got 2 minutes left. Not done yet. Where is it? Okay. So we have these 3 types of interests: the joint tenancy, the tenancy in common, and the tenancy by the entirety. The biggest difference between the 3 involves what happens upon death. With a joint tenancy, the survivorship. With the tenancy by the entirety, the survivorship. With the tenancy in common, it goes to the heirs of the tenants. The next big difference has to do with how you create them. The joint tenancy, there's the 4 unities: time, title, interest, possession. With the tenancy by the entirety, there's the 5th unity: marriage. With the tenancy in common, you only need possession. Now, in terms of severance, if you break any of the 4 unities of a joint tenancy, you go down to a tenancy in common. If you break any of the 4 unities of a tenancy by the entirety, you go down to a tenancy in common as well. Okay, I think I'm done. Any other questions? I'll see you all next week. Have a wonderful week, and good luck for mock trial.